Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we're discussing when is the best time to go on your Disney vacation. We're going to look at best time for Walt Disney World, best time for Disneyland, and it's a complicated question.
I was going to say, it considers many different factors.
Yeah, because I think, I think there used to be an answer, like a more definitive answer on when the best time was. Because there used to be slow periods of time, and Disney with their variable pricing has kind of spread that out. So I think it takes into a lot of factors looking at, based on weather, based on cost, based on crowds, based on what events are happening. There's kind of a different answer depending on what your priority is.
Right.
So we're going to go through kind of all of those different options. And again, so, if crowds are your number one priority, when's the best time for crowds, that sort of thing.
So if people really like being around crowds, when should they go?
Exactly. Yeah. If you're an extrovert and you just love being around thousands of people,
you can't. You check Disney World wait times, and when they are less than an hour, you're appalled.
Too low. 10 minutes.
You're appalled.
Too low. Yeah. So when's the best time for that? But before we get into that, I want to cover a little bit of Disney news this week. Kind of quiet on the Disney news front. Coming out of D23, we had a lot of news. We were talking beforehand because we were talking about what news is out there. And I even said, I kind of feel like Disney has, Muppets is closing. They have where Monsters, Inc. is going, and there's a good chance people have talked about it might take over where Muppets is. I feel like they have some sort of bad news like that ready to go, and they're just waiting for some other positive news story, or they're waiting for Universal to announce something big that they can kind of slide this under the radar, that hoping that nobody hears it, because it's kind of what they did with Cars Land taking over the Rivers of America. It was after D23, it was the day after, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, Tom Sawyer Island's going away, Rivers of America is going away, and it did get some publicity, but I feel like they had so much other stuff from D23 that it didn't get as much as it would have gotten. So I feel like there's just bad news waiting out there. That's just me of there's no other real news out there, so I feel like they're waiting for it. But the one piece of news is that The Nightmare Before Christmas will be coming back to theaters. So Disney seems to be doing this more. The Lion King for the 30th anniversary came back to theaters over the summer. It was only one weekend though. I felt like it would have been longer than one weekend. That's why we didn't get to go. Yeah,
even though your wife emailed you and said, hey, look, these are the theaters that it's playing at. Let's go see it.
Yeah,
here you go. I did all the legwork for you. All you had to do was just buy the tickets, and then you just didn't do it, and then lo and behold.
You could have bought the tickets too.
I mean, I could have bought the tickets.
All the legwork.
That's typically your role.
Yeah, but how was I supposed to know it was only going to be 3 days? It was going to be out in theaters. So Nightmare Before Christmas is coming back in theaters October 11th. I don't know how long it's going to be there. And it'll
probably only be there for a couple days. So if you want to go see it,
I have to imagine this runs at least through Halloween. This has to at least run a couple weekends. That's what I thought Lion King would have done. I thought Lion King would be out there a little bit longer. But this being a Halloween movie, I feel like there's a chance it's out there a couple weeks. But yeah, I think if you want to see this in theaters, go see it. I think it's just an interesting model for Disney, though, of they don't have a ton of movies coming out. And so let's just fill in that with old movies we know people like.
It's like their equivalent of releasing movies from the vault. They're releasing them from the vault, but they're putting them on big screen as opposed to putting them back on DVD so you can own them.
It's a good model as a way to make money. I mean, they've lost money recently with streaming and with theatrical releases not doing well. So this is a good way. It's not costing them any amount of money to re-release Nightmare Before Christmas, so that they can just get basically free money coming in for this.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. And I think that we need to go see Nightmare Before Christmas, seeing as we missed out on The Lion King.
Again, my point with The Lion King too was you can see it on Disney Plus. There's nothing about seeing those movies in theaters.
That's not true, though. I think the animation looks really good when it's big, and can you imagine the sound system during the Stampede scene? Can you imagine how much I would be bawling during the Mufasa scene.
See, I think it's the opposite. I think animated movies, I don't think it matters whether you're on a movie theater or not. I
completely disagree.
I think they look just as good at home. I think you need to see the big live action spectacles in a theater with people. You want to see
No.
No, Nightmare Before Christmas. Maybe I guess Lion King has songs too, but like that's not something people sing it. Like Deadpool and Wolverine was fun because everybody was laughing, everybody was into it. Like I feel like you need a large crowd like that. Like I feel a re-release movie, there's not a lot of people going to, like if they did something where it's, hey, we're going to do a sing-along with The Lion King, or we're going to do a sing-along with Nightmare Before Christmas, then it makes a little bit more sense. Otherwise, I can just watch it at home and have you sing along, or you say all the words to The Lion King. Like I don't want to pay to go to the movies and then you whisper in my ear everything that's going to happen.
Listen, I can hold back, especially in a public place. We went to see Hamilton today. I know all the words to that, but...
And you were sitting there singing it the whole time.
But not audibly. I was mouthing the words.
I heard you.
No, you did not.
You're like, oh, this song's next. Oh, this one's next. I heard you.
I mean...
Luckily, there was nobody sitting next to us.
I was excited, but yeah. I was holding all of my excitement under wraps, keeping my excitement under wraps.
The best was you're like, oh, I forgot about this one. Oh, this one. Like, you were like getting excited. Like, oh, yeah, that's right. This one's coming up. But yeah, you were singing and dancing. Nobody around us was. I always like,
everyone's so stiff.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
do
you not know this music is
do you not like this musical? I mean, everybody at Hamilton has seen it. Like they know all the words.
Yeah.
Luckily, there was nobody sitting next to us though, which was kind of nice.
I did tone down like my seat dancing a little bit because I was worried the people behind me were really annoyed. You were starting
off. You had good seat dancing. Neither of us, actual dancers, terrible. Both of us, seat dancers. I think Olympic gold. I think we could definitely do Australia breakdance quality seat dancing. We need to get that as an Olympic sport, seat dancing. I don't know how we got here, but we need to
get
back on track. So back to the main topic. So when is the best time to take your Disney vacation? This is a big question people always have when they're planning trips, when they're thinking about going to Disney. The question always is, when is the best time to go? And like we kind of talked about at the top of the show, and this is not a very good answer. People, it's not an answer people want to hear, but it depends.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, obviously there's set times they can go if they have young kids and they only want to go when the kids are out of school. You're only going June, July, August. So you're kind of pinned in to that time period. Now, I will say even with that, there are some better, or worse times around that. If you're more flexible throughout the year, you don't mind taking your kids out of school, or you don't have kids, you can kind of, go whenever. Getting off work's not an issue. Obviously you have some more flexibility there, but it does really depend on like, what is your priority? And so again, we're going to kind of look at this in terms of like each individual aspect of it. And then, kind of at the end, talk about, all right, based on all of this, based on our experiences, like when's our favorite time to go to these parks? So it does get broken down between weather, ticket prices, hotel prices, crowd calendars, and what events are going on at each of these parks. And for each of these, we'll look at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. So depending on, which park, which side of the country you're planning your trip on, you can kind of decide what works best for you.
So we can start by kind of considering the weather. So if we stay on the East Coast at Walt Disney World, we have kind of like a monthly averages, temperatures, and basically starting April, it's like 84 and 63 is like the low. So I feel like those are kind of like they're manageable temperatures. They're cool enough and definitely warm enough, but without being too hot. Also in April, I think you tend not to have the humidity, which isn't something that like this is even factoring in.
Well, that's the thing too with the humidity. So in terms of, and this is not necessarily humidity, but number of rain, amount of rain days. So April averages 4 days of rain per year. But then, you get into something like June, July, and August.
And even May is 88 is the high. And then I think we've been to Disney in May before, and that's when it's starting to get
it's very humid.
It's getting really hot.
But to the point of rain, June, July, and August, you're at an average between 12 and 14 days of rain per month. So August
that's basically half of the month.
Half the month, yeah.
Now, I mean, it could be Disney World rain, which is, sometimes that could be a complete washout. Like they've had a couple of those lately, but also it could be
Well, it's a very heavy downpour.
Yeah, 15 minutes of a heavy downpour, and then it's beautiful the rest of the day.
Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of just kind of, average temperatures overall, so obviously your cooler temperatures are going to happen in the winter months. So January, February, in March it starts warming up. But even then, I mean, January, the high is an average of 72, the low 51. So it's still pretty warm. And then you get to March and it's already the high of 79. So to your point, April's 84, March. So that March-April time frame does tend to be when it warms up, it gets into the 80s, but it's not as humid.
I mean, and if you were asking me as like a general human being, then like that March,
as a regular
April,
human person.
Yeah, as a regular
80
human person with a toothpick in my mouth. But yeah, I'd say like March, April with like 79 to 84, like without the humidity, that's kind of where I like it to be, like warm, but not like really hot.
And you can also kind of get those temperatures in like November and December as well. So it's average of like 78 in November, December 75. The summer is like the worst time to go in terms of temperatures. Like we mentioned, a lot of rain days. June, the high is 91, the low 73. July, high of 92, low of 75. August, high of 91, low of 75. So your lows are in the mid 70s, your highs are in the 90s. They easily have days over 100 with all the humidity, with the real feel temperature there. The other thing is mid-August through mid-October is peak hurricane season. So hurricane season like runs from June, I think, until basically the end of the year. But that August to October is your peak season. That's why you get a lot of rain in there as well. So one good thing to know is if you are going during that time frame, because we will get into some reasons why you may want to go during that August, September, October time frame. Disney does have a pretty good policy in terms of if there is a hurricane, if you need to cancel, reschedule your trip. So if a hurricane warning is issued within 7 days of your scheduled arrival, you can cancel or change at kind of no extra charge. So that is good to know in there. Over at Disneyland, again, your winter months are going to be cooler. Summer months are going to be hotter. Overall, it is a lower average temperature. Though I will say, again, this kind of being an average is Disneyland has had a heat wave recently. I mean, most recently, the past couple weeks ago was the Halloween race, and it was, I think, 75 already at 5 a.m. when the race happened, and they were easily high 90s to 100 degrees. So they've been going through a heat wave in September when typically average temperature is a high of 84, 85, low of 64. But your ranges are kind of a lot lower. So your January, February timeframe, your high is in March, you're around like that 70 degrees. The summer months, you're getting up to 84 in July, 86 in August. The one thing is very little rain. You really don't have to worry about rain too much in Southern California.
We went a couple years ago in June, and I definitely think that I spent a lot of my time being a little bit chilly, especially over at Universal Studios when we were there, because a lot of their rides get you wet.
I mean, Universal's tagline is "You will get wet."
Yeah,
I mean, especially in Hollywood, it's crazy.
Yeah, so like, I mean, at least my outfit was like pretty like a shorter skirt, and I was pretty.
We were
freezing.
dressed for that 80-degree average temperature, and it was much closer to the low of the 62. I think when we went as well a couple of years ago, I think the other thing, and I think this is something you do have to kind of factor in when you're going to Southern California, is it can be warm, but that's when the sun's out. It was very overcast when we were there, and I think that's why it was cooler. So it wasn't necessarily that it was like cold there in any way, but it was very overcast. So without the sun, it didn't get to that 80 degrees. And then you're at Universal Studios and like you're on the water rides and stuff. We did the Jurassic World water ride, got soaked on that, and again, with it being overcast, it's not that warm. That was not super comfortable over there.
Not at all.
So I think in terms of like weather overall, I think Disneyland, avoiding the summer months just because it is warmer, maybe into like that, like July, August, September kind of time frame. If you can, I think is probably better. And then over at Walt Disney World, You kind of mentioned like that March to April time frame, and I'm with you because we've gone a couple times during that time frame, and I agree. The humidity hasn't come in yet, but it's 75, 80 degrees, sunny. It's very nice to be out there then.
Yeah, and it's nice because, especially if you're coming from a cooler weather climate, whenever it's like March, April, you're tired of the cooler weather. So you go down to Florida and it's like you got the heat minus the humidity, and you can finally warm up and get out of your sweaters and like all the heavy clothes and coats that you've been wearing.
I would even say like January through mid-April. Because when we went a couple years ago for marathon weekend, it was January. It was very nice. I mean, it was in the 70s.
I'm trying to think if I was wearing jeans. I'm trying to think if I was wearing jeans or not on the Metal Monday. Because I remember like the picture, and I'm trying to picture it in my head.
Like at night, you might need a jacket or something like that. But like,
I definitely would wear long pants. But I do think it was pretty nice then. I feel like it was like mid 70s.
All right, so moving on to cost. So cost, obviously, there's a number of factors in there. Ticket prices is a big thing, but there's also hotels as well. So looking at both of those for Walt Disney World. So for the ticket price, this works the same way at Disneyland as well, but the ticket price is variable depending on when you go. And then, if you go for multiple days, it's a different price. And if you go for one day. So just to kind of look at things consistently, just looked at a 1-day ticket, looked at just the Magic Kingdom because that tends to be the most expensive park. So Touring Plans has a calendar that shows all of the different ticket prices for every day, so you can kind of see when the best time to go is. So your most inexpensive time is going to be weekdays, just kind of in general, versus weekends. But weekdays in January and August and September are kind of your best week. So the end of August and into September. So January, the average is about $159 to $164 a day. This is weekdays. In August, it's $159 on average, 160, kind of that same range. The last 2 weeks though of August, it drops down to $129 to $134, and September's around that $134 average as well. So January is higher than even August, late August, and September, but those are kind of your more inexpensive times to go. Most expensive times to go are going to be your holidays, your big holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, which is $189 a ticket. But also you got to look out for things like President's Day week in February. That's $184 on average. Spring break, Easter, Memorial Day, those are $184 as well. So if you can avoid the holidays, but even again, like spring break, President's Day, you might not think of that as like a big holiday, but that's an expensive time to go to Disney as well.
Yeah. And I don't know. This is the part where it frustrates me, not as a person who has kids, because we don't, but as a teacher who has the same schedule as children. So the times when I'm available and therefore children are like available to go, that's when it's more expensive. So I'm sure that's why they price it that way. That's when you have breaks off of school, you have days off of school. So because of that, I mean, the only time that sometimes you might get a break on some of the cost would be over the summer months. Sometimes when maybe it's like very, very warm and people don't, I know that Disney has offered different incentives before to try to get people there, like drive them there whenever, like, it's those hot months. But again, that's not the opportune time, as we've kind of already talked about, to go if you want to avoid being in a
sauna, basically.
Not a sauna, a steam room.
Oh yeah, a steam room.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, you're right. I mean, the summer months, June, July, not the most expensive time to go, but not the cheapest either, as well. So that is around $170, $175 a day. But you're right. This kind of comes into play again when it's not the most expensive time to go in June or July. So you can find some days there that are comparable to in early January, let's say, but you're right. The temperature is 100 degrees and you got basically a 50% chance of rain happening any given day, versus you go in January, it's 20 degrees cooler, there's less humidity, and you can save maybe $5 to $10 on a ticket. So like, again, this is where it starts. If you look at just one individually, you're going to make one decision. But if you start looking at them combined, that kind of really factors. It plays into it as well as an extra, $10 a day or something worth it to avoid some other inconvenience.
And the only other, kind of point to just raise before we maybe move on would be that if you're talking about January for Walt Disney World, you do also have to kind of be cognizant of when marathon weekend is, because you are going to probably have higher crowds.
Well, that's crowds. So we'll get to crowds.
You're going to have higher crowds, but I'm assuming that the ticket prices are more than
the ticket prices, marathon weekend, they are a little elevated compared to the rest of January. So again, January, you can get tickets for $155, $160.
Yeah.
That marathon weekend, that's like the higher end, but it's only about $165.
Oh, I kind of would have assumed
it's
that
still
there was
less,
a correlation. Yeah.
It's still less than going in the summer for a lot of days. So
yeah,
but the crowds are a factor, which we'll kind of talk to. So also looking at hotel prices, and again, there's a lot of different hotels. There's a ton of hotels at Walt Disney World, so it's hard to kind of go through them all. Mousesavers.com does show the rack rate, so that's the undiscounted rate for the hotels. And that's the other thing. So, Disney runs discounts. A lot of times in the summer, they run discounts as well. So, that factors in of the ticket prices are kind of that middle range in the summer. You might be able to get a good deal on a hotel and kind of save some money in the summer. But again, you have the weather, so it kind of building on top of it. But some examples for the hotel prices, because they do basically follow the ticket price increases and fluctuations. But if you look at something like All-Star Movies, in January, you're looking at somewhere between $133 to $193 a night. August to September is $153 to $187. And then you get to like Thanksgiving, that's $238 a night for the All-Star Movies. Christmas is $305 a night. Very expensive. Now, again, this is the undiscounted rate. So it could potentially be lower than this. And then if you looked at like Coronado Springs, which is a moderate, January, $260 to $290. In August, you can get as low as $307 a night. September is about like $320. There are some dates in like April and May, kind of in like that $306, $307 range. And then Christmas is $470. So again, kind of, your January, August, September are kind of your more inexpensive times to go. And then the holidays, especially around Christmas week, is going to be your most expensive time to go, kind of across the board. So I did look at the Grand Floridian. And so this is a question for you, Angela. So this is just a resort view room. So this isn't a water view room. This isn't a theme park view room, which are obviously going to be more expensive than this. So what do you think the undiscounted nightly rate during that Christmas holiday week is at the Grand Floridian? So we know All-Star Movies is $305. And we know Coronado Springs is $470. So I'll give you a hint. It's going to be more than that.
Well, my guess was $1,000 a night.
That's your 1,000?
Yeah.
It is $1,350 a night.
I mean, that's insane.
Again,
that's so much money
for a resort view. I believe the theme park view room was something like $1,700 a night over at the Grand Floridian. So again, that's undiscounted. They don't necessarily run a lot of discounts during the holidays because they don't have to. It's the busiest time of year. So if you're not like DVC,
it's the most wonderful time of year too.
It is. You could potentially be paying like $1,700-$1,800 a night to stay at the Grand Floridian. That's insane. It's insane to pay $300 a night for All-Star Movies.
Do you think if you just bring like a tent and you camp out on the front lawn that you can do that for like $100?
That's a good question because they do. Well, they have the campgrounds. They have the campgrounds at Fort Wilderness, and I think those are like $100 a night normally. So I wonder what those run during the holidays. I would have to imagine they have to be near 200.
I mean, has there ever been somebody though that's just like, I just camped out on Disney World property?
Yes, and they quickly got escorted out by security and probably banned. If they tried it. But yeah,
that sounds like a good YouTube video that we will not be doing.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
We will not be doing.
Yeah, I mean, if All-Star Movies is $300, I have to imagine the camping is at least $200. All right, so heading over to Disneyland. So Disneyland does their ticketing a little bit differently. They have tiers. They have price tiers. So it goes from tier 0, which is $104 a day, to tier 6, which is $194 a day. So again, weekdays are going to be better in terms of that. No weekend is under tier 3 throughout the entire year, which is $154 a day. Similar to Walt Disney World, it's interesting how basically they kind of follow each other in terms of crowds, busy times, that sort of thing. Late August into September is a lot of like tier 0s to tier 2. So you're looking at $104 up to, $120 or so, $130. January is also mostly all tier 0. Early November as well, on the weekdays, you can get some pretty inexpensive tickets. They're tier 0 to tier 2, which isn't too bad, which is interesting that it is a little bit cheaper in like early November on there. Kind of more on that later. And then the holidays are all basically tier 6. And then the summer is also pretty high as well, going over to Disneyland. And then Disneyland, the hotels, they have very few hotels on property, and they're basically all deluxe hotels that cost $300-$400 a night normally. The thing about Disneyland that's different is there's so many other non-Disney hotels there that I'm sure any time of year you're going to be able to find a hotel that has some sort of deal. There's just so many there that if you're a Marriott member, you might be able to find a good deal on a Marriott. If you're a Hilton member, you might be able to find a good deal on a Hilton. So I feel like the hotel pricing doesn't really matter. Like I feel like that you don't have to factor that in as much over at Disneyland, just because there's so many options there that I think it kind of helps keep prices a little bit lower. And you don't have to stay on Disney property. We've never stayed on Disney property at Disneyland, and it's never been a problem.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes it's just really hard to get onto Disney property. Like sometimes it's hard to find rooms. I know one time we did try to use our points in order to stay. What hotel were we trying to stay in?
Well, the Grand Californian.
Yeah. And so I know that we tried to put in for that. Like you tried to put it in for that for like quite a while in advance.
It's basically impossible because like the DVC rooms at the Grand Californian, and I know I'm making this number up, but it's like there's 20 rooms. Like it is the smallest number that like of any DVC resort. So if you are not a DVC member at the Grand Californian that you can book at that 11-month window, there's basically no way you're getting it unless you wait list and somebody cancels like last minute. But even then there's probably so many people ahead of you. So it was a long shot.
Yeah.
But we
weren't trying that hard, but you tried. But I mean, yeah, it's always been easy to walk there. Usually we stay within a mile, like mile and a quarter probably of the park. And it's not a big deal. It's not like Walt Disney World where it's kind of harder to stay off property.
You're right. It is so much easier to stay off property at Disneyland. I mean, some of the hotels are basically right across the street that you're probably walking just as far as you would if you stayed at like the Disneyland hotel. Because that's probably about the same distance there. So moving on to crowd level. So we kind of mentioned this, and again, it's going to follow ticket prices, hotel prices, because Disney, as they shifted, years ago to this variable ticket model, it was all in relation to crowd levels. And, again, it used to be there was a slow time that you could go in the winter and there would be no crowds there. And Disney saw that, so they said, all right, we'll make the ticket prices cheaper then to get people to go. Then we'll make them super expensive during the holidays. We'll make them more expensive during the summer to kind of incentivize people to spread their trips out throughout the year. And it has done that now it's pretty solid in terms of crowds every time you go. Like the past few times we've gone, you don't get that. And maybe randomly get a day here or there, but like you don't get those days where you go into a park and everything's like a 15-minute wait. Like you don't have that anymore because the crowds are kind of so spread out so well. Right.
Yeah. I think that unless you probably get like a freak instance where like there's a downpour and everybody leaves the park and then it stops and clears up and it's a beautiful day, you're probably not going to have that experience of just like walking on to the rides. You're going to always have some sort of a line. Now, of course, like you mentioned before, though, holidays and things like that, that's just going to be, I mean, you're going to have to expect that you're not going to ride very much because there's just going to be a ton of people there.
Yeah, that's when you're going to need Genie Plus and Lightning Lanes. But even with or Lightning Lane Multi-Pass or whatever it's called now. But even with that, I mean, I think so many people would be doing that. It's going to be hard to get a lot of attractions in.
Right.
Now, this is all Walt Disney World because Disneyland, and we'll get to it, is a little bit different in terms of their crowd levels. To your point, like if there is rain or bad weather, you could get a day where you don't have a lot. And that's just because of it's a different group of people that typically go to Disneyland versus Walt Disney World. So we'll start over with Walt Disney World. And going off the crowd calendar, and got this information from undercovertourist.com, they kind of rank everything based on like a 1 to 10 is the scale in terms of the crowd calendar here. So looking up at the next 12 months. So basically this is them projecting out September through next August. Weekdays in September coming up this year, 2 to 4 on average. In October, you're at like 4 to 6 on weekdays, like a 7 to 8 on weekends. Early December is a pretty decent time to go in terms of crowds. That's about 4 to 6 on the weekdays and 7 to 8 on the weekends. Most of the weekends, you're at like a 6 or a 7. Weekdays are obviously a better time to go. But that's a good point with like December because you get very busy and it's very expensive for Thanksgiving and it's very expensive at the end of December for Christmas and New Year. But that like first 2 weeks of December, and we've gone a couple times that like first or second week of December for a weekend, it is a good time to go. And kind of going back to the weather and the crowds, you know, again, it's not too bad in that window because you kind of, it's in between. Everybody's either going, they either just left or they're waiting until the holidays.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the best thing if you're really gonna try to predict the crowds, you just think when do people go? Like as soon as I think September tends to be relative like lighter except for Labor Day weekend because that's when a lot of the kids go back to school. So you're not getting those families and people traveling.
Yeah, that's a big thing we haven't talked about so far is that the back to school time, and that may be the only true time, like kind of going back to what you're saying where you're not gonna have a day where you have a lot of just like walk on rides. The week after school starts, like the very last week of August, maybe last 2 weeks of August, first 2 weeks of September, not Labor Day weekend, that might be the only true slow period at Walt Disney World. Like we mentioned, the crowds weekdays in September, 2 to 4. I mean, 2's pretty low in terms of crowd level. That may be your really only window because the other times of year you figure you have like January. January isn't too bad. Weekdays are like around a 5 in January, February. But like early January, you have marathon weekend. Like you have races some of these other times. Or, you know, like we talked about, February's President's Day. Then you have spring break in March, Easter, April. That 3 week window, late August, early September, that's probably the last true slow period you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense because most people whose kids are going back to school, you don't want to pull them out the first couple weeks of school because they're just trying to learn it. And obviously you don't want to make a bad impression on the teacher as well, because if you don't have a student there that's going on vacation, it's like, why didn't you go on vacation all summer from a teacher's perspective?
Right. And I feel like I haven't seen it this year, but I think it was last year, maybe even the year before, like that last week of August, there was a lot on social media of where did everybody go? Because it was such a busy summer because everybody was traveling in the summer. And then it was like, everybody went back to school and nobody was in the parks for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it kind of, picks back up again. But so those are kind of good times and pockets to go. Late April, early May, again, weekdays about 5 to 6. So kind of medium, middle of the road crowds. Weekends are a 7. So those are kind of your good times to go. Your summers, obviously high crowds just because, again, everybody's out of school, a lot of locals out of school as well. So over at Disneyland, they are a little bit different in terms of when the crowds are there. So January is actually pretty high in terms of crowd level. So early January, it's projected to be about a 7 or 8 in terms of crowd level
Wow.
until January 19th. And then it's like a 4 to a 6, even on weekends, which is pretty high when you consider, Walt Disney World was like a 5 basically around, for all of January. So that's pretty high there. They're predicting all of April to be 7 or higher, basically every day in April, even weekdays.
Wow.
And then weekdays in May drop a little bit between 4 and 6. So again, much more crowded in April versus, Walt Disney World, where like late April and May wasn't too bad. So another time on the crowd calendar where it's not too crowded, it's pretty moderate. It's like around like a 5 or a 6 are weekdays throughout November, obviously not Thanksgiving, but until like around the second week of December. Then like the holiday crowds pick up, and then you're at like a 7+ through the rest of the year. And why I mention that is because, like we mentioned a little bit ago, November is a tier 0 in terms of ticket price. So it's the lowest. You can get a lot of days with the lowest ticket price for Disneyland, and the crowds are pretty moderate in that time. So if you kind of combine those two, November is not a bad time to go as well. August and September, around 4 to 6 during the weekdays, and then 7 to 8 on Saturdays and some Fridays. Sundays, though, are lighter, kind of like the weekdays. And so this gets into the difference in the groups of people traveling to Walt Disney World versus Disneyland. Walt Disney World is a lot of people vacationing, a lot of people internationally vacationing, a lot of people domestically vacationing. So it is somewhat steady in terms of the crowds and the people going. It's around high vacation times. Disneyland is much more driven by locals. I think it's one of the reasons why they're trying to do this Disneyland Forward and almost make a third park kind of without a third park, because they want to make it, I feel like, more of a vacation destination to try to get people to vacation there to kind of get it steadier. But right now it is much more driven by locals. So Fridays and Saturdays, you're getting a lot more local traffic, because basically Friday is essentially a weekend. Saturday is a weekend, but then Sunday, people are kind of getting ready to go back to work the next day. I was going to say,
like the, as I've heard it called, the Sunday scaries, and you're like, I don't really want to go to Disney World or Disneyland on this day because I got to get up and go to work tomorrow, or my kids have to go to school tomorrow, and I don't want to have like a hectic day and then roll right into a work week.
Right. I think the other thing that probably happens is, my guess is Sunday morning, early afternoon, it's more crowded. And then towards the late afternoon, evening, everybody's leaving. It empties out. And so that's kind of with it. The other thing about it, and kind of what we were talking about, is I think why, something like, maybe in January and April, it is a little bit more crowded because it's more driven by locals. Summers are definitely high and crowded there, just because, again, you do have people vacationing. You do have locals going, but weekdays are going to be better just in general, again, because it's more locals. But this goes to your point of, like, if you have rain, this is kind of when it can clear out because people just go home. The other interesting thing that is a little bit different about Disneyland is they're very crowded in October. So every day in October is high. And that's because that is their Halloween season, and they have Oogie Boogie Bash. And that's very popular. And so kind of getting into that and getting into the events, kind of playing into a time to go. So Disneyland, that is their big event, is Halloween. They don't really have, they have some after hours days, like they do the Sweethearts night in February. They do a couple Star Wars nights, but they don't have a Christmas party like they do at Walt Disney World. But they have Oogie Boogie Bash. And that is super, super popular.
I was just like laughing, thinking, I guess whenever I retire, we can finally go to Oogie Boogie Bash. Like, I want to go so bad.
Yeah, so it started this year, August 23rd, and it runs through the end of October. But I think if you're going to go for an event, and again, it seems like a lot of people do this because October, obviously that's, Halloween, that's the most crowded. So you could go in September and wouldn't be as crowded. But Halloween time, I think, is the best time to go to Disneyland because of Oogie Boogie Bash. They do have for Christmas, which runs November 15th to January 6th. They do a Christmas fantasy parade. They do Small World Holiday, and they do a special Holiday World of Color this year. So they do have some offerings, but it's not a special like after hours event. This is just like every day in the parks. They also do Haunted Mansion Holiday, but that's for the holiday season as well.
For the Halloween season as well.
That's for the Halloween. Yeah, that's for the Halloween season as well there. So those are kind of the big events. And over at Walt Disney World, obviously a lot more events happening. So basically Epcot always has a festival going. I feel like though, because they always have these festivals going, they're somewhat interchangeable, and that it almost doesn't matter which festival you're going for. Like, I don't think you should probably plan around a festival anymore, which is weird. Like, I feel like everybody used to go for food and wine.
Food and wine or Festival of the Arts.
Well, not even Festival of the Arts. I mean, I think food and wine was the one everybody went to, and now they've made basically every other festival
food and wine,
so it doesn't matter. So yeah, Festival of the Arts is January 12th to February 19th, and then Flower and Garden this year started February 28th, so 2 weeks basically after Festival of the Arts, runs through May 27th. And then Food and Wine started August 29th to November 23rd. And then Festival of the Holidays is November 29th to December 30th. So basically, June and July are the only 2 months that don't have a festival. But yeah, to me, these are all interchangeable and really shouldn't impact when you decide to go.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to kind of watch and make sure that you're not in one of the holes if you plan on going to Epcot to go around and sample and eat things, because those booths, I mean, we have, I think, been there like maybe one time when there wasn't a festival going, and it was kind of weird because the park did seem like strangely like dead, for lack of a better word, because it was just like there were normal places were there to eat, but yeah, you couldn't stop at the little booths because they weren't available. So if you're a person who's a foodie, just make sure that there is a festival going on, because there are some holes in the calendar.
The other, I think, two big events at Walt Disney World are Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, which is August to October, and then Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, which is in November and December. And the Christmas decorations come up about like a week after Halloween in there. So those are kind of events to think about as well. So again, if you want to go for Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, then you have to go November and December. Right. You know, if you want to go for Not So Scary, you have to go, you kind of have 3 months, August, September, October there. So you have a little bit of room to play with, but you're kind of locking in to those time periods. So yeah, looking at everything in total, and I think it's good that they have like Mickey's Not So Scary, for instance, over 3 months, because it allows you some flexibility in terms of when are you going to go. So like, I think if, you wanted to go to that, obviously August, September, October is the time you can go. It seems like September in terms of crowd levels are going to be your best bet. It is slightly cooler in September, maybe by a couple degrees versus early August. But again, that is, if you don't have kids, or, you're not worried about taking them out of school if you do, or if you can get off.
Or you're not a teacher.
Yeah, because otherwise you have to go, in early August, which isn't going to be as good a time in terms of like the weather.
Right. I will say like that is the one nice thing is about Mickey's Not So Scary though, is that you and I, unless we plan on taking like a long weekend or something, we can't actually go to that because it starts so early. Like, yeah, we're going to have to contend with the weather, but if the thing that we want is that particular event, then we can actually make it. And I think that's kind of the point that we're probably going to hit right now is like what's best. And it's kind of like, well, it's whatever. You're not going to probably hit on all cylinders. You're not going to hit a low crowd time with the cheapest cost. Like it's going to be very difficult with all of the events, just because it's difficult. Like it's just difficult to hit them all and get a bullseye.
Yeah, you're never going to get everything, and Disney sets it up that way that everything doesn't line up perfectly. So I do think at Walt Disney World, best time is probably weekdays in like late January, early February, just in terms of the lower ticket costs, the lower hotel costs. The crowd levels aren't bad. The weather, I think, is the nicest there. Plus, there is a festival. You have the Festival of the Arts going on there, so at least you have a festival happening. So that's probably, I think, like just overall best time. Like if you're not worried about, again, like I can only go at a certain time period, I want to go for Halloween or Christmas, something like that. I think for me, my favorite time to go is the holidays. So I think like November, December. So like we talked about, if you could do a weekday in November or like that early December right after Thanksgiving, because the weather is pretty decent there. The tickets are a little bit more, but again, they're kind of in that like middle price range, so it's not too bad. Crowds are a little bit lighter there because everybody's trying to go around the holidays. But Disney World is just beautiful when it's decorated for the holidays. And so I think that's kind of my favorite time to go. The weather's nice, crowd's nice, good decoration. So that's probably my vote over at Walt Disney World.
So I think that my favorite time to go would probably be that probably like February, March time, because as we kind of mentioned, you have like nice temperatures. You still don't have like huge crowds. And I just think that, where it falls in the year, at that point of the year, I'm ready for a vacation. So like personally, that works really well for me.
Yeah, I think late March, early April is probably my second favorite time of year to go, just for that reason. Like, again, it's like 80, sunny, not too humid. It's a nice time just to be down there, kind of like be in the sun. You're right, like you're coming out of winter. It's nice to kind of go.
It just
where it's
feels
a little
nice.
warm. Yeah, exactly. Over at Disneyland, weekdays, I think for sure, are the best time to go.
Or Sundays, apparently.
Yeah, obviously the locals go, more on the weekends. I think if it's price only, you're going in January because that's the lowest tier pricing. That's also like one of the coldest months you have there. Could also go in September. It's pretty inexpensive then. You just got to hope that there's not a heat wave going like we have now. I'm going, though, like I said, I'm going for Halloween. I think we've been to Disneyland a few times over the summer. I think if I could, it worked out like we had to go in the summer. Like, so again, we were kind of forced into that time frame. So that's why we would go. I don't think I would pick that if I had a choice. I think I would try to avoid the summer. But I would want to go for Halloween. So I think later in September, October, it's going to pick up in crowds. So maybe like late September before the crowds pick up. It's a little bit cooler, hopefully, because you're starting to get into fall. Like you don't have that August, early September heat. A little bit less expensive. I think that's the time I'm going because I think Oogie Boogie Bash is a huge draw to go see that and to be able to experience that.
Right. And I think I already said that. That's a bucket list item for me that eventually someday I'd like to go. So yeah, that's my time too that I would pick is I want to be there for Oogie Boogie Bash. I want to dress up. I want to see the characters and get to experience some of the really cool things that they do over on the West Coast for Halloween.
Yeah, so would love to hear from our listeners. What time of year are you planning for your next trip? What's your favorite time of year to go? What time of year are you thinking about? Let us know on Instagram. We're at Enchanted Ears Podcast over there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just let us know in the comments below. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.